Serious, former teens who went to wilderness camps, therapeutic boarding schools and other troubled teen programs. What were your experiences? My father lost custody of me for domestic violence and I got scooped up by CPS and put into the group home system. He got custody back a couple of months later and I ended up running away. They sent me to a place called Vision Quest, which was a place with troublemakers, but not that bad. The thing that was bad was that there wasn't any food. I was eating little single serving cups of cream cheese. Ended up running from there with another dude. And when we got picked up I ended up in a residential treatment facility. Mostly because they didn't know what to do with me since I didn't earn any jail time along the way. That place was full of mostly Native American kids. Some of them were from rival gangs. The violence was pretty bad. Midnight beatdowns, gang fights, racial violence, physical shaming and abuse, etc. The people running it really seemed to mean well and were actually pretty fair about seeing what really happened versus everyone gets punished, no matter what, despite what the other kids were like. It was the first time anyone really told me that it was my family that was wrong and to just focus on the program and work towards an independent living program, which I did. I was sent to the infamous PCS Provo Canyon School from 1994 to 1996. At the crescendo of the Standing Ipes era, I witnessed a lot of beatings and debaucheries, but thankfully I was never party to either one of those things. I kept to myself enough and got along with everyone. The worst thing was during a stint in investment, I noticed a few other kids working on loosening a pipe from a drain trap or a sink. I thought that crap was funny at the time, because hey, petty vandalism, right? Well, our group goes to the gym and these thugs hid the detached pipe in a towel. I didn't know until I see our big dopey counselor get whacked hard as frick in the head. I was the only one that stayed behind while the rest took his keys and escaped. They didn't get far, and when they were caught, they were all beaten mercilessly and restrained for days before being hauled off to juvie, or real jail, or the hospital morgue or whatever. What was fricked is that the counselor was one of the few good ones. I used to stay up and play chess with him when he worked night shift. Worse yet, he had two brothers working there, who went from kind of buttholes to violent psychopaths after all that. And I got singled out because I was the only one left who was there when it happened. When the dust settled, I still did another few months in investment, stood over 1,000 IPs, didn't see the sun for over 3 months. Plus I took a lot of blame for not preventing that whole thing. Still no regrets, because I would have also taken a pipe to the head if I tried to do anything. I was definitely a troubled teen. A lot of running away, drugs, alcohol, etc. My parents sent me to Elan School in Maine. When I arrived I was strip searched and showered by a girl, not staff. It was pretty hellish. Abuse was the norm. It was a couple hundred kids and a very small handful of staff. Essentially if you won privileges you got to run things, until you messed up and had to begging the status climb all over again. We weren't allowed to make friends. That was called a contract and other kids would report you. Our days were spent watching each other, waiting for a chance to tell on someone because that helped elevate your status. If you mess up enough you'd get shot down. Sometimes it meant a costume meant to provoke ridicule. Sometimes being put in the corner, literally, unable to speak, not allowed to move around, guarded for however long by another kid. If the corner person wasn't cooperative then both got in trouble. There was also the boxing ring. One house or multi-house general meetings where you'd stand while everyone rushed you, screaming as loud as they could about what a terrible person you are. I can't type anymore tonight because I'll have bad dreams. Almost 40 years later I still see certain faces. If anyone is actually interested I can add more tomorrow, without touchpad typos lol. I did Outward Bound when I was 18. The group consisted of about 14 of us, all between the ages of 16 and 20. One girl was sent by her parents, I assume to straighten her up. On the first night we camped, she fled. She took a map, a compass, and I think some matches and was gone when we woke up. We were told later she had made it to a road and hitchhiked to somewhere. I think she eventually made it home. If there are camps specifically for kids in trouble, her parents should have sent her to one of those. I think I see why her parents didn't send her to a place for trouble kids. JFC. I did the Northwest Youth Conservation Corporation. It is not exactly a troubled teens program, But I was put in an interesting situation. I joined because it seemed like a fun way to spend a summer outdoors, doing some hard but worthwhile work in the wilderness, and make some money to buy a home-built PC gaming rig. I knew another person joining for the 6 weeks and it just seemed like a normal teenager summer thing. For the most part it was. Usually the crews are 5 guys and 5 girls. They did not have enough girls, so I got put on the all-guys crew. The all-guys crew had what seemed like mostly troubled kids and a few outright dangerous kids. We also got all the hardest projects and worked our asses off. Still loved every minute of it and reflect upon it fondly. If you are ever walking the trail along the coast to Cannon Beach in Oregon, I helped build some of it. I know someone who did that in the late 80s, had a great time, and learned a trade that supports him and his family to this day. Got the crap repeatedly beat out of me at a Mormon boarding school in Provo, Utah. Almost everyone there was kept on incredibly high doses of antipsychotics to keep us in line and so we couldn't fight back. When we did there was getting beat, strapped to a table, injected with drugs like Haldol and tossed naked into a concrete cell. School was a joke there and didn't actually bother to teach anyone anything. And the therapists, well, what they and the other employees deserve probably isn't allowed to be said on here. Those that have been know what I'm talking about. Basically, the whole experience was rather quite unpleasant. Went to Dundee Ranch Academy when I was 15. I am 32 now. It was shut down by the embassy for child abuse and living conditions among other things. I was there for a year and I still have nightmares of being trapped or jailed and other triggers. It sucks. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. My first gold. Thank you, anonymous Redditor. Just got out of a year-long program for drug abuse behavioral therapy type stuff and it was religion based and it was definitely something that I was not prepared to get myself into. I ended up getting an assault charge and sent to basically a prison for juveniles for a few days while I was there because a kid dumped 2 gallons of water on my bed and I whipped him with a guitar string. Not the best choice I've ever made. Now it is off my record, but that was definitely a turning point in the way I treat myself and others. I've got a lot of stories from there, so if you wanna hear any, I'm open. Give me a crazy story. My experience with being forced to stay at a boarding school was horrible. It was highly abusive in uncountable ways. The staff were unprofessional and most certainly not there to comfort you in any way. They actually did the opposite and called us names like liars and manipulators and overall tried to make you feel like a bad person. They controlled every aspect of every moment of your waking life. It was not therapeutic at all. Anyone who says otherwise who went to these places is either brainwashed and in denial or enjoyed the sadism of bullying other students. The ones willing to snitch on and mistreat others did well and advanced in the program. I was emotionally victimized by staff and students. There was no such thing as personal space or privacy. I was physically assaulted and abused by the staff. I am appalled these schools are still around and operating. Frick parents that put their children through that heck. They should not be legally allowed to continue to abuse children for profit. There's too many examples of abuse to put in one post. I am happy and relieved to say the school I was sent to was shut down for child abuse. Thank God. Was sent to a Marine-style boot camp for troubled teens. I was sent there because I was an a-hole towards my parents. Discovered upon arrival I was the only person sent there who was not in trouble with the law for assault, robbery, or drug possession, and I was made platoon leader of a bunch of kids who would probably end up in juvie after the camp. Fun times, would recommend for the amount of beatings, butt chewings, and gayness that went on there. By gayness I mean there was a large majority of closeted openly gay guys in the program. Some of the guys would secretly hook up in empty barracks. Some parents wanted to get help for them. No, I don't regret being sent there. I enjoyed my time and got my crap together. I learned to take charge and to be a leader despite not wanting to be one to begin with. By butt chewings I mean verbal abuse punishment for not being squared away from the DIs. I had a friend where that happened to him and his cousin all the time. Weird minor rule breaking got them pulled from normal school for a few days and into a weirdly authoritarian Christian school. Ultimately did more harm than good. Since if your kid has underlying issues with you as a parent and person, doing that to them anytime they talk back to you is only going to make things worse. I was forced into partial inpatient on the psych ward when I was 17 or 18 for about 6 weeks because I was considered to be an at-risk youth. It was basically like a diversionary program. Ever watched Girls Incarcerated on Netflix? It was kind of like that. Total supervision, walking in lines, rec hours, community meetings, the whole bit. All possessions got locked away from us and we got randomly drug tested a lot. Most of it was the same as juvenile hall. It wasn't too scary or even that depressing. Actually, the other patients were great. I became friends with a lot of them, and we even still keep in touch. In terms of the staff, many were phenomenal, while some were just not cut out to work in the field. To put it mildly, they could be super mean and harsh for no reason, and would blow up faster than us patients. Most of our time was spent in groups DBT, talk therapy, relaxation, recreation, etc. Mostly we just learned about coping skills and had to address what had happened that resulted in our hospitalizations. We also would get pulled out of group a lot to meet with therapists, NPs, nurses, psychiatrists, etc. to have one-on-one therapy or to adjust med levels. We had these goal sheets we had to complete each day, and on them they had this freaked up behavioral rating system. Some of the staff lived for docking points. Usually enough docked points meant an extended stay. I spent like 2 weeks begging and pleading to leave, and I swear they lengthened my admission every single time I asked. Food was given to us in labeled cardboard boxes. Everything served was vile. There were a ton of rules. No physical contact. No sharing food. No touching your face. No rocking back and forth in your chair. A bunch of other weird but rules about food. No speaking out of turn. The bathroom wasn't allowed a lock, and they could basically walk in on you whenever. Absolutely everything needed permission. I mean everything. Permission was needed to stand up and walk less than a foot away to get water from the cooler. There were a ton more, but I don't remember most of them. Kinda blocked out the ones that were worse, more unreasonable. It sucked, but I know a lot of other facilities are way worse, so I try to keep that in perspective. I got sent to Viewpoint Center and Elevations RTC in Utah a few years back. It was terrible and full of manipulative people. Was at Spring Creek Lodge in Montana 2004 to 2005. While I was there, a girl hung herself. I still remember her name. The lower levels were divided into families and you could only talk to the other girls in your family. Everything was earned from the right to use condiments to getting a candy bar once a week. You're on silent 22 hours a day. Talking to someone your own level takes away points. Talking on silent takes away points. They had upper level girls in charge of lower level girls. Some of the family mothers were super sweet, some were not. This was in Montana, so we had a lot of XM heads on the staff who were awesome BTW. They made us go to these weird butt seminars that were super invasive and supposed to be life changing. Discovery and Focus were a couple of their names. I could write a book on these seminars. It was a lot of work on trauma and getting out of your comfort zone done by people who were not trained. The goal was to graduate, but most didn't. This place was expensive if you weren't court ordered, so most parents took their kids home eventually. Oh yeah, they would read and edit your letters home, lol. If you begged to go home, you'd get demerits for manipulation. A lot of sleep deprivation on the upper levels too, and one time the heat went out, so it was freezing. Montana winters are no joke. I love Sundays because we deep clean and get PB&Js and a movie. I did make some lifelong friends there and people I'll never forget. First real connections I'd made in years. I went in with a lot of trauma and drug issues. I could go on and on, but what a crazy 10 months. I turned 18 in there and told my parents I'd walk to the homeless shelter if they didn't take me out. So they did. I couldn't sleep or shower alone for months. I had been around people 24/7 for so long. The worst was when people would disappear in the middle of the night to get sent to other programs. I got my HS diploma by taking the same tests over and over in a trailer we went to for class. Okay, that's enough from me. I could go on and on. Thanks for letting me share. I hated those seminars with every fiber of my being. I got sent to a military school across the country for a year because I smelled funny one night. Now I was drunk and high on ether, but that's besides the point. I went in with a shallow knowledge of drugs and came out with a master's degree. Fortunately, I found my feet after a few years of the lifestyle and am just an average drinker now that will occasionally indulge in some reefer. Overall, I would suggest that putting a bunch of people with similar problems together for an extended period of time isn't really a great idea. I was definitely one of the fresh fish there. Most of those kids had way more serious issues, just based on what they claimed. Hard to say. I was in a very odd Christian counseling for a week following my grandfather trying to kill me for being gay. It was basically the counselor asking questions about my father, then immediately saying, "You are not gay, your father was never around and you are chasing that affection." The thing was, I had already experienced a lot of crap from my abusive childhood. Physical shaming, physical abuse, all of it. So I brushed it off pretty easily. It was so funny watching her smile when I would ask questions about the Bible, because some of those stories are fascinating. It was like an on-off switch to counselor's brain about Bible got good, and anything else bad. Both my parents were addicts and having to learn to pick apart their expressions to what kind of mood they would end up on was easy by the time I was 15. Unfortunately, it also got me to bury my emotions and never process the trauma. I was diagnosed PTSD in 2011, underwent therapy that changed my life. I didn't want to believe it sane first, but man, had my life and myself changed so much thanks to PTSD therapy. Sorry for the long post. Stoned and kind of in a reflective mood at the moment. TLDR. Christian counselor blames my father's negligence on why I'm gay. I'm gay because I like dong, and sometimes what they are attached to. Used her without direct reference to whom I was referring to, which was the Christian counselor. That's terrible. Sorry to hear. I'm straight, but it really hits me in the gut when I hear people using religion and other nonsense to try and wash the gay away. It's strange how being gay is treated almost the same as being possessed by a demon. I went to a 13-month therapeutic boarding school, aka residential treatment center, till I turned 18. It was in Utah, and the worst experience of my life. I have long-term CPTSD and issues 10 years later. We are not coincidentally called survivors. I watched a person having a seizure get pressure pointed till they died. I watched a teenage girl held down by 3 adult men scream like a wild animal. I've never heard anything like it. I watched therapists convince girls they lied about physical shaming, assaults or abortions, and tell their parents they were liars when they weren't. They strip searched you, made you squat and cough naked, even if you just went off campus to the dentist and were with staff the entire time. Even in the bathroom, when they intaked you the first time, they kept your underwear in a plastic bag. We were told this was for the dogs in case you run away. The worst was just the long-term, systematic, institutionalized breaking down of innocence, creativity, and independence that these kids might have otherwise been able to revel in had they been born in different families or households. I didn't talk to my parents for years. Our relationship will be strained forever. The school was finally shut down for child abuse 3 years after I left, but reopened under a different name. The group that owned it, Aspen Education Group, owned by CRC Health, owned by the Boone Group, on which Mitt Romney sits a board member, has tried to keep me from getting my HIPAA and legally entitled medical documents for a decade. Got sent to a Christian boys ranch mostly because of rampant ADHD. I could tell stories for hours of all the crap that went down there. There were good times, like a weekend at Tablerock Lake, and bad times. I once was forced to spend a total of 4 days in a field spreading manure with a pitchfork in a field. Another boy was regularly locked in a blue bunny trailer as a consequence. 2 more ended up running away, which happened fairly regularly, and killing an old couple. Pretty sure it was in the news. Now living with one of the guys I was friends with there and his GF. I went to a place that was for Christian parents to bring their teens who were troubled. Every morning we were required to wake up 2.5 hours before school and do an hour of chores upon waking, followed by an hour of mandatory Bible study. We then would go to school, which was really just a building with 2 ladies that sat all day at their desks as you did Christian homeschool workbooks from like the 1950s. We weren't allowed to listen to secular, non-Christian music, watch secular movies nor books. We were allowed to communicate to 2 friends on an approved list once we leveled up, which was achieved by memorizing 30 plus Bible verses that sometimes were multiple pages long. I had a friend who is from the Middle East whom I had been best friends with since childhood, and I got into huge trouble for trying to contact him as an approved friend, even though my parents were completely okay with it, because he was Muslim. If we did get into trouble, which I did a lot, we were required to sit for up to 24 hours in a room by ourselves with only a Bible, were not allowed to see our parents, and had to do 30-40 hours worth of chores. Sometimes we weren't even allowed to eat. We got all our food donated to us, so most was way out of date. I got kicked out after a year and a half being there because, well, you can take the gay out of someone. I still have nightmares about that place. I was a seriously troubled youth, and while I wasn't sent away, I was sent to a school for troubled youth, and it saved my life. I had a relatively traumatic upbringing in bad circumstances, poor family violence, who was in trouble from the day I set foot in school. I got suspended in grade 1 for attacking another kid. I got suspended in grade 5 for attacking a teacher. And throughout my childhood I was used to having police at my house to break things up when me and my brother would fight with my dad. My dad left when I was 12 and my mom's was working 2 jobs. So the result was that I could run the streets without worry. I did drugs. I sold drugs. I jumped and robbed strangers. I stole cars. I got into fights and got kicked out of school twice. I had zero hope of finishing grade 10, never mind finishing high school. I felt unloved and angry. I was convinced I was going to join a gang and sell drugs for the rest of my life. Hopefully I would live to 30, I thought. I went to the new school. It was strange. A hippie school where the focus was on learning in your own way, but there was a focus on continuing to learn. Teachers were called by their first name. If we didn't want to go, all we had to do was call and tell them. Most of all, they cared. Instead of being treated like the criminal I was, they treated me like the troubled kid I was. When I got high, they looked the other way. When I got upset, they let me calm down. They set expectations for me and told me that I mattered. When I missed school because I was in jail, I didn't get marks taken off for missing exams. Instead, they called and asked if I was okay and how I was doing. I was an all-around shithead kid. I did really bad things, and if I didn't go to that school I would have done worse things. But for a few years in my life I had a stable place to go with people who cared, and it made all the difference. I graduated high school, got stable emotionally, and went to university. I went to law school at a top school and am now a successful lawyer with an amazing family, which I still don't feel I deserve. My friends from back then are either dead, in jail, junkies, or serious drug dealers, gangsters. I try not to think about them very often because it makes me want to cry thinking about the loss of life and sadness. I still can't believe that I made it where I am, and the deciding difference was that school. The other path for me was leading only bad places. There's not a day that goes by that I don't thank the universe for putting me in a place with people who cared. I still get uncomfortable when people talk about kids overcoming hardship on the road to success and ascribe it to some sort of strength of character, because it's really luck. I got lucky to get placed in a good spot. I'm not a stronger person than my old friends. I was just in the right place at the right time. Anyhow, that was my experience. I was hospitalized for a week and then spent 3 months in wilderness therapy when I was 17. Actually turned 18, put there, and had to switch groups. Different experience in the adult group than the teen group. Being hospitalized was extremely traumatic, and I still deal with PTSD symptoms from that experience. Wilderness was actually good for me. I went to a program where we did yoga and meditation every day and ate organic in the whole 9. Still have to call my name when I peed and give up my shoes at night. Adult residential rehab fricked me up after I got out of wilderness. Crazy people don't make great roommates, obviously. Went to a camp after my brother died when I was 9. I was completely lost beforehand because we were attached to the hip, but this place significantly helped me process and understand death as well as life, and gave me a lot of help as far as starting to move on. Mostly had a lot of outdoors activities that incorporated grief techniques, considering the other participants had lost someone close to them too. Hope everyone else is doing okay. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.